This isn't your typical marketing software ad because HubSpot ain't typical. It's marketing made easy. Turn one piece of content into assets for every channel, convert leads in no time, and get a crystal clear view of your campaign performance. HubSpot can do all that and get you results fast, like double your leads in 12 months fast. Yeah. See, told you this wasn't your typical software ad. Visit HubSpot.com/marketers to get started for free. Good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, March 3rd. I'm John Weigell here with Juliet, Bennett, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Beyond Meat, Impossible, and others are in deep trouble. The plant-based and lab-grown meat giants are not as tall as they once were, with investors pulling back their shares and market caps falling fast. So how did the hype die, and what's next for faux meat? We'll chat about that in a bit, but first let's give you the hits and headlines today around business and tech. To kick us off today, Skype calls are officially a thing of the past. Parent company Microsoft announced that the video chatting service will go offline indefinitely starting on May 5th. So what happened here? Signs point to a cultural shift towards social media and a lacking user experience for team conferencing when they needed it most, aka during the COVID outbreak. Next, at the end of last week, Nvidia revealed that once again, it beat earnings expectations in Q4 of 2024. More interestingly, though, the report also revealed that just 3 customers make up approximately 30% of Nvidia's total revenue. And from there, we go to space. Firefly Aerospace, a startup on a mission backed by $101.5 million in NASA cash, successfully landed its Blue Ghost lander on the moon, the second ever commercial moon landing. Blue Ghost will now spend 2 weeks strolling around and serve as a moon thermometer, burying itself in lunar soil to test the moon's temperatures. Same. Okay, a new trend alert. Parents of kids that got accepted to college are now throwing them bed parties. This is originally a southern trend that gained popularity on TikTok recently, of course. When the child is accepted to a school, parents decorate their kid's bedroom with tons, and I mean tons, of memorabilia from said university, whatever it is. The cost, according to New York Times, of these bed parties are usually in the thousands. That's a lot of money for some streamers. And finally, the Oscars might be a pretty big deal, but the gift bags at the event might be even bigger. Entertainment marketing company Distinctive Assets offers premium gift bags to select nominees. You could say they offer distinctive assets. Each bag is worth upwards of $216,000, and this year it includes a trip to the Maldives, cosmetics, body treatments, and more. So we should just all start acting, I think. Okay, so we all know plant-based and lab-grown meat, right? It made waves into supermarkets a few years ago. However, that initial boom has deeply slowed. Juliet, can you talk to me a bit about Beyond Meat, for example? How well are they doing or not well?
Compared to where they were, abysmal. Now, Beyond Meat IPO'd in May 2019. Shares went up 163% in a single day. By June, its valuation had reached $10 billion. Now, some people did say that was overvalued. So take that for what it's worth. And then compare that to today, where Beyond Meat's market cap is about $245 million.
Wow.
So yeah, big drop. Now, obviously you got to consider that the first number, a lot of people thought was overinflated. It wasn't actually really worth that much. That was too high. But I mean, that is a huge plummet.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in 2019, 2020, where Beyond Meat, Impossible Meat, all these companies started popping up, and it became the pseudo future of meat.
Yeah, for sure.
How we're going to consume meat in the future, because there's been a lot of worry from a lot of people over the years about the meat supply, especially for like beef, and how long we can theoretically still have beef in our lives. And this seemed like a good solution, and it got really blown out when it came out, and it's fallen ever since. Are there any other plant-based sort of companies that you know of that have had a similar trajectory that did well at the beginning and now have fallen?
Well, there's a lot of companies, they come out, they've got a great product, and then they just cannot sustain it. Willowcroft was a Dutch dairy company. They announced that they were going to close because they just could not sustain funding. They had a lot of funding difficulties. Sundial Foods, that was a California alternative protein startup backed by Nestle. They closed, again, challenging fundraising environment. San Francisco Sci-Fi Foods. They had hybrid meat, which was plant-based and cultivated hybrid. They closed last year. Again, citing a challenging financial fundraising market. And that's kind of what is happening. You've got these companies that may have a good product or an innovative idea, but they just cannot get the funding.
Yeah. And it seems like the funding that a lot of these companies already got, circa Beyond Meat, have been pulled.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it becoming more difficult for these companies to get that funding that they need?
Yeah. Well, the interest rates are high.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of investments in 2020, 2021 that has slowed due to high interest rate. And there's just a lot of concerns around pretty much everything right now. Climate change, the economy, political discourse surrounding alternative proteins. For some reason, eating a veggie burger has become very political, especially in the United States. So, there's just a lot of reluctance to invest in this sector right now.
Yeah, and it seems like lab-grown meat specifically is feeling the brunt of that because it is the kind of golden child of the faux meat industry.
Yeah, I think lab-grown meat is super interesting. That is like one of my favorite new weird technologies to talk about. But fundraising for cultivated or lab-grown meat actually plummeted by 75% from 2022 to 2023, whereas alternative protein in general dropped 44%. And what's interesting about, lab-grown and cultivated meat is, again, there are a lot of politics around it. What do you call it? What are you allowed to call it? Certain countries have banned it. Certain states have tried to ban it. So,
sure,
it's having a rough time.
Yeah, definitely. Very politically charged. Florida last year banned lab-grown meat, so it's not doing too hot over there. So there's been kind of this huge backlash against it. So we have a lot of problems in lab-grown meat, plant-based meats. What about the other areas of the industry? You mentioned that Dutch dairy company. Are there any faux dairy industries that are doing well?
I mean, broadly, the problem with alternative proteins, and that's meat and that's also cheeses, eggs, et cetera, is a lot of times the real thing is still cheaper and it tastes better. So there's no compulsion for a lot of people to switch, especially in, as we like to say, this economy. And then vegetarians, they can find better, cheaper options in tofu and tempeh and just actual vegetables, instead of trying to find a patty that bleeds like a cow or a piece of cheese that stretches like mozzarella. That said, there are some really positive developments in the cheese space. There's a California startup called Climax Foods. They work with proteins to develop cheeses that reviewers are saying taste just like the real thing, which if you're lactose intolerant, maybe that's something you want to keep an eye on.
Listen, I mean, Kraft singles are barely a cheese themselves, so.
That's true. That is true. And I was reading about another company that is like, we can make a cheese that stretches just like the real thing. And, maybe that's an option. I think the big problem is that it is very hard to scale. The Dutch cheese company that shut down was like, over our 6 years of being in business, we produced as much cheese as one of my grandfather's cows did in a lifetime.
Wow.
So not great output, but there are some investors. Interestingly, last year, Lauren Sanchez, who you may know as being the vice chair of the Bezos Earth Fund, but also Jeff Bezos' fiance, announced a $60 million contribution to build the Bezos Centers for Sustainable Protein, which is going to work on this. I guess that makes sense. If you own Whole Foods, you want some good alternative proteins.
Want some good things to sell at Whole Foods. I agree with what you were saying before, too, about how these faux meats are sometimes more expensive than regular meat and don't taste as good.
Right.
It seems like kind of a drawback to a lot of their business models, especially with vegetarians seeking options elsewhere, because they're also not necessarily healthier either.
That's the other thing,
than a lot of these regular meat options, right? They're usually pretty loaded with sodium.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a who is this for kind of situation.
Yes. I take a class at the gym and the trainer there in this class is a nutritionist, and she is always talking about how these are actually ultra processed foods, a lot of them. All of those chemicals are required to do the things that make it meaty, that make it bleed, that make it juicy. That's not the same as I remember in high school, if you got a veggie burger, it was like lentils smashed together into a patty.
Yeah, like black bean burger of sorts.
Black beans, yes.
Yeah. The classic veggie burger.
And I think that has more appeal to the kind of person that's trying to cut their cholesterol, be healthier, save money, because that's cheaper, that's healthier. and honestly sometimes tastes better than some of these alternatives that is just like, okay, this kind of sucks. It was expensive. It's not healthier for me. I might as well just eat beef.
Right.
So I think that's a challenge. Can you get consumers to adopt this product? And if so, it's going to have to taste good and be the same price or cheaper than the real thing. And to do that, you're going to have to find a way to scale it and produce it at a cost so that you can offer it at a cost that's appealing to the consumer. And I think until that happens, there are going to be a lot of issues with finding funding, because if it's not sustainable, nobody really wants to invest in it.
Right. And if it's not desirable for the consumer, nobody really wants to invest in it. So don't know if they can turn this around, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor is Robert Hartwig. Our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. Go sign up at thehustle.co/email and throw us a follow at The Hustle Daily on Instagram. And we'll see you later.